Om Shri Sai Ram. I'm Venkat Reddy and I'm here with Brother Amey Deshpande, who has graciously agreed to give us a few minutes of his time while being the keynote speaker at the Beyond 2020 Ignite Sai Young Adults of Zone 3 conference. Brother Amey, welcome to New Zealand.
Thank you so much. Absolute pleasure to be here.
Is it your first trip to New Zealand?
That's right, it is.
And how have you found the country so far?
I think it's a jewel, it's a gem. I heard those were the words used even by Anil Kumar sir
Yes.
when he was here. So when you have this much of natural beauty, it's rather easier to, I think, connect with God because there's so much of His creation that you can see in its full bloom and its full beauty.
Swami called New Zealand New Sai Land, and
Yes.
We try to live up to that.
Yes, and I think if I can also add to what Swami said, the zeal that I have seen in all the youth here
Yes.
has truly now made it into a new zeal.
Zealand.
Yeah.
Beautifully said.
Sai's zeal.
Beautiful.
Zeal for Sai.
Beautiful, beautiful. And how have you found the conference so far, brother?
I think it's really eye-opening, really interesting. The creativity, the innovation, and at the same time being grounded in spirituality is, two things that don't come that easily. And I think the young adults have matched the two tremendously and fantastically. The way they are presenting everything, and it's been a real eye-opener, and I take back with me a lot of learnings and in fact ideas that I can take back to Prashanti as well as the other youth groups that are looking out for ideas that they can implement in their countries.
What a wonderful and unintended side effect.
Absolutely. and that's exactly the symbiotic relationship that should be there across organizations, because after all we're just one big family.
Absolutely. One big Sai organization with
Yes.
the same
Yes.
Divine Mother.
Absolutely. Yes.
It's beautiful to hear you say that, Brother Amey, and very gracious of you. Our purpose was to get something out of you, but we have
So Swami has
given something to you.
So I must confess that every single trip of mine, this is what goes through my mind. So Swami, what am I going to learn this time? Because every single trip, I learn much, much, much more than I can ever contribute. And that's what makes me look forward to all of these trips, because right out there in the farthest so-called corners, of course the world doesn't have a corner,
Yes.
but in the corners of the world, okay, when you see Swami and Swami's flag fluttering and flying so high and so well, it kind of makes you wonder, what are you doing? Are you doing enough to deserve the glory that you're seeing? And the amount of work that Swami has done physically in the 85 years that he was physically on earth is, I don't think any avatar has, I mean, I'm putting my neck on the line here when I say that, but in his lifetime, the number of hearts that he has physically touched, I think it's just incredible.
And with that, when we sense that, it's very humbling too, isn't it?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yes.
Do we even deserve to be a part of a mission like this? What have we done to be a part of such a grand mission? So it exists on our spiritual paths, definitely.
Perhaps the only thing we can do is to repay that, is to keep doing work in His name.
Yes, to make Him our everything. I think there's only one breath worth having, and there's only one heart that's worth beating, and when it beats for Sai.
Sai Ram. Brother, speaking of the heart that is beating for Sai, when did your heart first start beating for Sai? When did the blood of Sai start coursing first through your veins?
So I must say that I was extremely blessed to be born in a family which has a very rich devotional and intellectual background. And I think those two are, in many ways, they are kind of opposite. So generally we tend to believe that when you have devotion, you don't have much logic there.
Yes.
And when you have intellectualism, then you don't have much emotion there.
Yes.
But when you have a combination of two, I think that can be a lethal one. And I think I get that from both my mother and my father and their families. So I was pretty much born in a Sai devotee family. My father, in fact, way back in 1974, it was my mother's eldest brother, Dr. Ravindra Kulkarni, who was a professor back in City University of New York, and pretty renowned mathematician. Um, he had gone to the US way back in the 60s, and finished his degree at the Harvard, and so he was pretty a big figure in our own family.
Right.
And in 1974, in his home in Bloomington, Swami appeared right out of the photograph.
Physically
Physically.
stepped out of the photograph.
Yes, in his house in New York.
Side up.
Yeah, in the New York State. And that was, in fact, and Swami told him, come to Brindavan, come and see me. And this was a so-called one of the intellectuals in our family. And this was what was told to me that by my father, that my mama was coming back to India after several years, and he stayed like a couple of days in Bombay with his parents and spent a month with Swami in Brindavan, attending the summer showers of 1974.
Wow.
And that kind of shook up my family a bit. I would say in the good and the bad way, that who is this Baba, who has caught hold of the Mama,
The mama.
the so-called intellectual, mathematician, logical, and that, and he was completely blown over. And so that was the first impression that my father, whose wedding had just been fixed with my mother.
Right.
Okay, who is this guy coming all the way from the United States, after several years, spends 2 days in Bombay, spends a month in Brindavan. Who is this Baba? What's going on? Yeah. And so that was what kind of egged him on. So after he got married in 1975, that was the first darshan that he had of Swami in 1975 in Brindavan.
Wow.
Yes, and that's how it started. Of course, after that, there was not much interaction, or there was not much involvement of my father in the organization till he went to Bahrain, a Gulf country,
Yes.
in 1977. And of course, I would say the rest of it is history. It happened in the most strange of circumstances. So my father is actually he comes from a very devotional family. They do a lot of rituals at home, and they pretty much have a list of gods, like many of the other Hindu households,
Right.
where, someone will listen.
So you might as well go through all of them.
Try your luck.
sense.
Exactly. Try your luck with everyone.
Yes.
Pray to everyone, and hopefully someone out there will listen.
Will listen.
And so very promptly into that long list of already existing gods went the name of Satya Sai also. It got added on to that list. And so he would attend the Chinmaya mission prayer sessions. So the Chinmaya mission was also also a great spiritual movement.
Yes.
Which was kind of the principles of Chinmaya mission are very similar to that of the Satya Sai organization, which is respect everyone, respect all the gurus.
Yes.
So they used to have a prayer session, and in that prayer session, in the altar, there was a photo of Bhagwan. And so my father had gone way back in 1977, and he was alone in that country, and so he would go to these prayer sessions, and he loved that photograph because somehow he got attracted to Swami's photograph over there.
Something about it which he probably couldn't explain.
Yes. It was this photograph of Swami with his hand on his hip.
Yes. One hand on the hip, one hand blessing.
Blessing, yeah, Abhayasta. Yeah. And that photo continues to be with us in my home in Parthi. And so he walked up to the organizers and say, "Hey, can I take that photograph? I somehow love it." Okay? And they told him 2,000 rupees. Way back in 1970.
2,000 rupees for a photograph.
For a photograph.
Was it made out of gold or something?
I don't know. I just thought it was an opportunity cost for them. And so he says, "Oh, well, 2,000 rupees, I think it looks good here." And my father
I'm not
left
surprised.
it. Yes. My father left it there. And just maybe a week later, there was an announcement, in the prayer session, before the prayer session began. It went something like, we are shifting the premises of the Chinmaya prayer, this meeting from here to a smaller place.
Right.
Where we cannot accommodate so many photographs. So whoever wishes to come and pick up any photograph of their choice, please come and do so. There was everybody, Ramana Maharshi,
Yes.
Yogananda Paramahamsa, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, everybody was there.
All the great ones, the great
All the
masters.
ones, yes.
Yeah.
So my dad tells me, or he tells us, that that day he was just focused on that photograph. He wanted to jump on that photograph right after the prayer session.
Right.
And as he jumped, immediately after, there was a tug of war because there was another person who jumped on that
Also
photograph.
had their eye.
Yes. And so there was a little tug of war. Okay. And this person said, "So are you a devotee of Baba?" Okay. And my father said, "Yeah. I mean, I just want the photograph."
Yeah, just say whatever it takes.
Exactly. And this gentleman then said, "Why don't you come to my home for bhajans? I am having a little prayer session." Okay. And that's how in 1977 my father first started attending bhajans with just about 5 families. And that's how the Bahrain Samiti started. And then, of course, I came later and I joined him. So that's
Sai
my...
Ram. So he lost the battle for the photo, but he won the war of,
No,
coming into Sai's fold.
No, in fact, we won both.
You won both. You got the photo as well.
We got the photo as well.
Brilliant.
Yes. And because the other devotee who was fighting for it, he had plenty of photographs
I
at
see.
home. And so he was more than willing to let go of this.
He was just...
But yeah, for him it was a good deal. Give the photo and get a person.
Get a person to come for bhajans.
Yeah, for bhajans. Because it was such a small, there were 5 singers in those days, that's all.
So he increased the population by almost 20%.
20%, yes.
Good
20%
move.
return on investment.
And so now we are in Bahrain. Your father, having witnessed this strange turn of his brother-in-law towards Swami, has now come into the Sai fold. What happens next?
So, in fact, I think that's where the organization plays such a big role. And my father, in fact, our entire journeys have, been facilitated and supported and kind of cushioned and buffered by the Satya Sai organization. So, though it was such a fledgling organization in those days, my father remembers, he keeps telling us that the discipline that the gentleman who introduced Swami to my father, the person who played the tug of war,
Yes.
he was such a disciplined person. And he inculcated that discipline right into my parents. And I think both my mother and father, they loved that, that element, that discipline, that come what may, Friday we have bhajans. Even summer vacation time when nobody else was there in Bahrain, in fact, my father tells me that there were days on study circles, nobody but my mother and father will be there. And they wouldn't do that study circle in their home. They will go to the center. Come to the center, just 2 of them, open Satya Sai Speaks, read for half an hour, and then say Om Shanti Shanti and go back home. That's it. Right? But that kind of discipline, and I think both of them loved that. And that was the discipline that they kind of inculcated in me.
Into you.
And then, of course, the great event of 1983, which is now very well documented. But so one of the devotees, Mr. Dwarakanath, in fact, he is still around. He is one of the district presidents of the Satya Sai Seva organization in Bangalore. And he was a very staunch Vaishnavite. So they are believers in Vishnu.
Yes.
And his mother-in-law had come over to Bahrain. And, so even from the name you can make out Dwarakanath. So they are very, very Vishnu and Krishna based.
Yes.
And when she got to know that her son-in-law was following Sai Baba, who's supposed to be a Shiva incarnation and Vibhuti and all that, she was absolutely, it was the biggest shock of her life.
Yeah, I think the term is freaked out.
Completely freaked out, yes. And kind of, she was like, what is my son-in-law doing? It is blasphemy.
Yeah.
Believing in someone of the Shiva order is blasphemy.
Blasphemy.
And, I'm not sure whether these are actual stories, but they're legends that have come from her. It seems she would fix her ears with cotton buds. Okay, and lock herself. Of course, this part I know. She used to lock herself in the inner room so that bhajans don't fall on her ears, lest she will get
polluted,
desecrated.
This great Krishna temple gets
yes, desecrated by Shiva's
sounds and his name.
Yes. So she would actually lock herself in the inner room when bhajans went on. And she took both her grandchildren who had just born, that is Mr. Dwarakanath's sons, hoping that at least I can salvage them,
save them
from this onslaught. And that was the condition. And I think it was in the March of 1983, one of the days, when she was alone with her 2 grandchildren at home. Mr. Dwarakanath and his wife had gone out. and there was a knock on the door. And so she did not open because
She was alone.
she was alone. And the knock went harder. And so she woke up, she got up and she went up to the door. And now the knock was like even more urgent. So she put the burglar chain in, apparently. And she opens the door to see Swami standing there outside the home. And she knew one thing, that Satya Sai Baba doesn't belong to Bahrain.
Right.
So this is a freakish, vision that she's having. And so she opens the door and allows Swami to come in. And Swami is holding an apple in his hand. And Swami says, give this to Dwaraknath. As if Swami did not know that Dwaraknath is not at home.
Right.
Right? He exactly chooses the time when Mr.
He's
Dwaraknath
not
is not at
there.
home.
Yeah.
And he gave the apple to her and said, give it to Dwaraknath. And then materialized Vibhuti and put it on her forehead and gave her Pad Namaskar and then vanished. And so after Mr. Dwaraknath came back, obviously there was a huge thing at home.
Huge excitement.
Huge excitement,
Yes.
but kind of a trepidation along with the excitement is that, is it possible? I mean, we know Swami can do it, but
this
my
really
house?
Yeah.
Did he really come to my home? And how do I take her word?
Yes.
For all you know, this could be a hallucinating old lady.
Hallucination. Yeah.
Yes. And she was trying her best. Please believe me, she's telling.
Yes.
And apparently she even pointed at her forehead and said, Vibhuti. Can you believe me putting Vibhuti?
Yes.
Okay. And, well, that was a big thing.
Yes.
But it's still not conclusive.
No.
Okay. And
It's circumstantial evidence.
Exactly. and then she went on to say that even if I had to put Vibhuti, will I not put it this way? Why would I put it this way?
Nice. Good point.
I find that so cute even now.
It is, isn't it?
That for a lady, how orthodox she would have been.
Yes.
That even if she would have taken Vibhuti and put, thinking it's Chandan, right? She would have put it straight,
up, yes.
which is the Vaishnava tradition,
Yes.
rather than the horizontal,
Across,
which is
yeah.
the Shaivite tradition. And so that's when, Dwaraknath uncle, he called up my father, my parents, and said, I think, my mother has lost it. My mother-in-law has lost it. And so my father reached home, and this lady was sitting in the quiet corner crying because nobody was believing her.
Yes.
And everybody was trying to console her. Amma, it's okay.
It's okay.
And she, it seems at that moment, in that one moment, she said, if I'm speaking the truth and Swami had come here, right now, Swami, show me your presence. And there was this little photograph on top of the refrigerator. And in front of everybody, Vibhuti started appearing on that photograph. And my father says that's the only time he has actually seen the entire process of materialization. You know how it bubbles form in like liquid, and then it's crystallizing and it's drying up and hardening and it's falling off.
Like a
The next
chemical
wave.
process.
Yes, he's actually seeing it on his in
On
front
a
of his
photograph
eyes.
on a fridge
On a
across the
refrigerator.
room.
Yes, and kind of there was pin
That
drop
was it.
silence. Everybody went back home.
And believed
Obviously, I mean,
the auntie.
if you cannot believe that, well,
You need to
will-
be put somewhere.
Yeah, you will never believe anything. You will never believe anything in your life.
Yes.
So
Wow.
many months later, my parents had been to Prashanti, and they happened to meet Professor Kasturi, who was then the editor of Sanatana Sarthi, and they had written a little article of Swami in Bahrain,
That episode?
of the episode, and
Yes.
they had sent it over to Professor Kasturi. And so immediately, like when he got to know that my father was from Bahrain, he said, "Hey, I got this article from Bahrain. What are you aware of?" And so my father had the opportunity to tell Professor Kasturi himself, of his first person, account of that. And then Professor Kasturi was very happy. So my father asked Professor Kasturi, "Will it come in Sanatan Sarthi?
Will you publish it?
Will you publish it?" And Professor Kasturi said, no. See, we get thousands of mails or hundreds of mails like this, of Baba here, Baba there. Unless we have Swami's permission, Swami directly tells us we do not put things into Sanatan Sarthi. And in the June of 1986, there is an article which says Baba in Bahrain. And that pretty much that's the end of that story, because then we knew that Swami was authenticating his presence,
Yes.
in Bahrain. So that's been the journey.
That's an amazing introduction to Swami. And, the key role that your father played and his friend played in affirming their faith, absolutely concretizing it. You would have been a small boy at that time.
Yeah, I was maybe 3 or 4.
3 or 4 years
Yes.
of age. In your cognizance, when did you start to recognize what Swami was, what he meant for you?
Yes, so I remember that I loved bhajans, and bhajans have always been my first love, and I loved them very dearly. So way back in those years, I was telling you about this gentleman who was very strict and very disciplinarian in the organization. He wouldn't allow any children to sit for bhajans because there'll be noises and it kind of disturbs the discipline, the decorum of the organization. So all the children were put into a room where they could play. Of course, there was one child who was allowed to sit in bhajans, and that was me. Because I loved bhajans, and so I would sit quietly. And
Yes.
in fact, even now, some of those uncles come back and tell me how I used to sing Omkar, very loudly, and people had to tell me, okay, hey, hang on, man, relax, dude. So probably, maybe this is what I'm guessing is that a lot of people used to pull my cheek saying, very disciplined boy, very good boy. And so maybe that had even then had started pumping my ego. So I remember that I think it was 86, 85 or 86, when this was my first cognizable darshan that we had come to. And in those days, there was no Kulwant Hall. It was just the open, and there were the sands of Prashanti. And so even now, of course, now in the sense when Swami's physical form was there, more than Swami's darshan, I think what every devotee wanted was token number 1.
Yes, the coveted number 1.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we were also waiting for that, and we spent several days, and we were nowhere close to 1. And then eventually we got this token number 1, and I was so excited because now I'm getting to see the hero that my parents had been talking about up and close. First time probably I'll touch him, and that was what the excitement was about. Just to give a prelude, to me, my parents had always told me that he is your hero. This is God. And to me, Sai continues to be predominantly my hero.
Yes.
Right? So I look at my nephews today and, they have, Superman.
Superheroes.
And they have Spider-Man as heroes. Also my greatest style icon.
Right.
And everything about Swami was like, wow,
was
how
cool.
does he does it? It was, just the wave of his hand. I felt it was like equivalent to the Spider-Man doing this. Was Swami doing this, and the gentle sway, and then he would just write off, he just sign off, in the air, and just his walk, his gait, it was like he was a glider. He was on wheels.
Yeah.
He just glided across. So everything about and the crease which kind of fell through his entire robe.
One line,
and you would wonder, how is it not getting spoilt with all of that walking?
Yeah.
And so all of that was like the style part for me. Whenever I look at Swami's photograph, and I'm sure we all feel that way, by no stretch of imagination is Sai Baba beautiful or handsome, and yet there is something about his beauty. Right, his nose, his eyes, the mole on the cheek, his lips, his ears, everything. There's something about that beauty, which probably for any other person would be, that's not beautiful.
Yeah.
But I don't know, we're just in love with that form itself. Forget the spirit behind the form. Yes. The form itself is so attractive. And so I was getting to see this form up and close, is what I thought. And then I'm sitting over there, and then, of course, I did not know that children were not supposed to sit in the first row. Right? Because many times what would happen is when Swami would come for darshan, the child will just run up to Swami. Right? So the children in those days, in fact, right up to the end, the earliest they could sit is probably the third row.
Yes.
Right? Also because the child really does not know, cannot grasp the situation of what's happening.
It's a similar reason to why children were not allowed in the bhajans in Bahrain, because of the discipline.
Exactly, exactly. So one of the brothers in the blue, I call them angels in blue.
Angels in blue, beautiful.
And angels in blue, who are in charge of our spiritual growth.
They're like our spiritual jockeys on a horse, getting us to keep going faster and faster.
Correct. So, it's a very loaded word.
Yes.
In charge of our spiritual growth in every which way.
Yes.
So, one of these brothers came up and said, Sai Ram, and of course, over the last couple of days, we have heard a lot of Sai Rams.
Sai Rams,
So,
that's right.
yeah. So, Sai Ram, come on, get up.
Chalo.
And I'm trying to explain to him that, I'm not one of those kids.
I'm special.
Yeah, I've got the authentication certificate from Organization of Bahrain. that I'm a disciplined kid.
Yes.
And obviously it didn't work. That certificate was not applicable in Prashanti.
Different jurisdiction.
Yeah, exactly. So very promptly, because I was trying to argue, which was making the case worse.
You were actually defeating yourself.
Exactly. I was picked up royally and thrown into one of those sheds, those arches that used to be there.
Right at the back.
Right at the back. In fact, there was one arch which was meant for mischievous kids.
Oh dear.
Right at the entrance of the mandir. I can never forget that. Right, you enter into the mandir, and on your left hand side there was an arch, where all the most mischievous kids were thrown in.
The jail.
Yeah. Okay, and I was thrown into that.
Oh dear.
Okay, and I really felt like a convict. I felt like a criminal, and I couldn't take it. And I remember I screamed and I shouted. Okay, and I still remember what I shouted. I said, "This is not real Swami.
Sai.
This is not real Swami." And for some strange reason, I said, "These are not real Sevadals."
Sai Ram.
I still don't know why I said that. But I think I remember the feeling inside me is, how does this Swami not know about me? Like,
Yes.
not know that I am who I am.
I am who I am. Yes.
And soon that laughter ensured that we got the first row, but outside the darshan hall. Both me and my father were thrown out of the darshan grounds.
So the little jail arch wasn't enough. You were upgraded.
I was upgraded into the first row, but outside the darshan ground. So, from absolutely the first inside the ashram mandir to the first outside.
Yes.
And I remember, I was crying.
Such trauma. Yeah.
I think it was also because my ego was hurt.
Yes.
I wouldn't entirely attribute it to my devotion for Swami.
Yes.
But yeah, so after that, in those days, what used to happen is after Swami would give the morning darshan, all the devotees would go for breakfast and would come back for the 9 o'clock bhajan. And very, very few devotees would kind of loiter around inside the darshan grounds.
Right.
Because Swami would be busy with the interviews. So my father said, see, anyway we are leaving, like, I think it was tomorrow or something. So he says, why don't we just give up breakfast and just sit, just enjoy, and at least we'll get an opportunity. We were outside during the darshan, at least get an opportunity to enter the darshan grounds on one of our last darshans. So we just went inside, and my father said, please don't cry, at least now, from here also we'll get thrown out.
And don't say anything.
Yeah. So we went inside and we were just generally sitting, like there was hardly any crowd. And it was about 40 odd minutes, probably 7:45. So Swami would come for darshan between 6:50 and 7. And then about 20-minute darshan. And then it was about 7:45. And suddenly the door opens. And Swami standing out there. The interview is over. And he looks in my direction. And comes straight walking towards where I'm sitting. By which time, Swami is coming. I'm being pushed and I'm sitting in the first row.
Back to first row.
I'm sitting in the first row.
Sai Ram.
Okay, no sevadals, no nothing, because Swami is on his way.
Completely unexpected.
Yes. And Swami walks up to me and he tells me, hey, kai ko chillata hai? Why were you shouting? Why are you shouting? And I had shouted an hour ago.
Yes.
Hour or more than that ago. Right? And here was Swami. And more importantly, here was my hero standing right in front of me, and he's talking to me.
Sai Ram.
Really up and close, that face. And then Swami said, good boy. And then Swami asked me to take Pad Namaskar. So that was my first interaction, which kind of, I remember, made me feel that this is the real Swami. I had told, this is not real Swami because he doesn't know what's in my heart.
Yes.
Okay, and Swami wanted to tell me that, yes, this is the real Swami. That upar wale ke ghar mein der hai lekin andher nahi. that is, in the house of the Lord, there may be a delay, but never a denial.
Never.
Yes, and I knew that this is a Lord who listens to our prayers. This is a Lord who not only listens but responds to our prayers. Yes, the times may not be the way we kind of feel it is, but He knows exactly when to respond. And pretty much He walked into my heart as my hero. So that was my first experience.
How beautifully did he validate you or even turn your assertion to him from the back of the darshan compound on its head? Just like that lady Dwarkanath says, Mum, how instantly and dramatically
Correct.
he validated her words.
Yes.
He did
yes.
something similar for you.
Yeah, in fact, just to add, I was talking to Dwaraknath uncle many years ago. I was meeting him after several years. And he was telling that, so I was asking him, how was your mother-in-law? And of course, she had passed on. And he said that from that day, till the end of her life, almost 11 years or so, wherever she went, Vibhuti would materialize in the photograph, in where she went. So,
Sai Ram.
yeah, so I think it was something like Swami said, you know what, Mom, once you challenged me, I'm going to hound you now.
Just in case you waver.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, so sometimes I always feel that we need these dramatic incidences in our life, what we call as dramatic, because for God there's nothing, this whole universe is a drama.
It's a drama.
Right? But He gives us these opportunities, and I think that is something that we can ask for. It's our bounden right to ask Him for an experience. Yes. Swami, I want an experience. In fact, Swami had told that don't ask God for anything, right? Ask Him for an experience. Yeah, so we can ask Him.
An experience of Him which will make us want to experience Him more and more.
Yes.
Beautiful.
So I remember brother or Jagdish and sir, from Malaysia, he would often say that when you come to Swami for the first time, He will part, the curtain away and give you a glimpse of that divinity. And then what He does is He pulls back that curtain and says, now reach me.
Now reach me.
Yeah. Now you have seen me once.
Yes.
Now here is the curtain of Maya. Now reach me.
Now reach me.
Right? So it's not a free lunch.
Yes.
You have to put in effort.
It's a taster.
Yes.
And then you have to work.
Yes.
And of course, it's a beautiful analogy too. And Uncle Jagadishan has come to New Zealand a number of times. It's a beautiful analogy because it tells you that you saw me through the gap in the curtain. You know I'm behind this curtain, but now you have to part it.
Correct.
Beautiful.
So in fact, that is what, that's the part of the self-effort in the spiritual journey.
Yes.
Right? So God will give you that experience. Now the choice is up to you.
The rest.
Yes. How fast do you want to part that curtain? How intense are you in your feeling to go back, and get that vision?
Yes.
So some people could just say that, yeah, I got it.
I'm done.
I'm done. Let me go and tell a million others.
That's right.
Right, but that's not the purpose for which the vision was given. The purpose for which the vision was given, so that now you intensify your effort to go back and merge into that vision.
And keep making that effort.
Yes.
Beautiful. So at this point, when you said to Swami, not real Sai Baba, and he came to you, this hero of yours came and stood in front of you, and again just took you back in. How old were you at this point?
I think I was 5 or 6.
5 or 6.
Yes.
After that, how did your life play out?
So it was a great set of circumstances, I would say. I exactly am not able to recollect. So it was my mama, right, who had first
Dr.
had
Kulkarni,
yes, Dr.
from the
Kulkarni,
US.
Yes. They wanted to do something, way back in India. We wanted to set up a school on the lands that we had. We continue to have those. And I think they had taken a proposal to Swami. They wanted a Satya Sai school, to be built in our village lands. And I think that was the excuse with which we had reached Prashanti. I think it was in 88. So this was happened in 85, 86, and in 88 we had lined it up with this proposal. And I think it was under the excuse of this that Swami had actually called us all in for an interview. Our entire family, my grandfather and my mama and all of us, my mother, my sister, myself, except my father, everybody else. So that was the first interview we got. And of course, Swami revealed a lot of omniscience, uh, by which time that was not even like, that was hardly impressive.
Yeah.
Because we knew Swami is, somehow I never felt that, oh, how does Swami know this? Because
Yes.
Swami was telling my cousin, I remember, exactly the position in which she would study.
Sai.
Okay, how she would be lying on her bed and how she would study and how she needs, to focus more. And she was doing her MA in Sanskrit, her masters in Sanskrit. And Swami was telling, you need to, put better effort, because that's not the way you do. You just sleep off on your bed and that kind of thing. And at that time, it just looked like,
yeah, okay.
yeah, correct, kind of, okay, yeah, I'll work on that. Means it never struck that, oh my God, Swami knows everything, you know. So it was a bit like that. And then in 1989, Swami had been to Bombay, and my
Which
father.
is where you were staying? By
I
now?
was staying, of course, in Bahrain.
Bahrain.
My grandparents would stay in Bombay.
Okay.
Swami had visited Bombay, and my grandfather had written a book which is called Sri Satya Sai, the Fount of Vedic Culture. So my grandfather, which is Dr. Kulkarni's father, Dr. Shripad Kulkarni, um, was is one of the great writers in Maharashtra. He has in fact written 18 volumes rewriting Indian history. Yeah, and so in fact the first book that he had written, or one of the first books he had written, is Adi Shankara, the Savior of Mankind. And that book had fallen into the hands of Kanchi Paramacharya, Periyava,
Yes.
Chandrasekharendra Saraswati, the previous Shankaracharya, who was considered to be one of the great realized in the lineage of Shankaras. And he was very impressed with the book, because he thought that a proper study had been done. And he had beckoned my grandfather, and he told my grandfather, "Tum beta tum itihas likho." Right, you write history. And so my grandfather had spent the next several years of his life rewriting history in 18 volumes. And so there were these two books, Adi Shankara, the Savior of Mankind, and Sri Satya Sai, the Fount of Vedic Culture, which both of which he had offered to Swami. Uh, and in 1990, when the Institute of Sri Satya Sai Institute of Higher Learning had their first summer course, after the university was set up.
Right.
So the 1979 summer course was the last, but that was not with the university students. That was with students all across the country.
Okay.
The 1990 summer course was the first summer course with the university students, the Swami's university students. And Swami invited my grandfather to give two talks exactly on these two topics, which is Adi Shankara, the Savior of Mankind, and Sri Satya Sai, the Fount of Vedic Culture, in that summer course. And those were some of the most golden days of, that's when you got the bite of what being a Sai student means, because it was just my mother, my sister, myself, and my grandfather. And because my grandfather was one of the speakers, so he was one of the VIPs.
Yes.
And so we were getting VIP treatment. Like, I would be sitting along with the students, for all the darshans. And so in the evenings of the summer course in Vrindavan, Swami would come to have dinner with all the boys, with all the students. So because my grandfather was a speaker, he would be sitting, at the table along with Swami. And I was given a designated place in the dining hall, okay, to have my food. And Swami would be there. And every day, as he will very quickly, by the time we finish Brahmarpanam, Swami would have finished his food. Right? And then Swami starts walking, he will be overseeing the serving of the VIPs.
Yes.
And the moment he goes to my grandfather, from there he will turn and he'll look at me, saying, hey,
to make the connection.
Yeah, to make the connection.
Yes.
Every day, this used to be the thing. Hey, your grandson sitting there. I remember one day, I had changed my position. From this side of the aisle to this side of the aisle I had sat. And Swami looked and said, where is he? Where is he? And I said, Swami, I'm here.
I'm here.
Oh, you changed position. So after that, everybody said, no, that's his position. So I was given back my position every single day. Okay, so there were the most beautiful days to be, the intimacy with Swami.
Yes.
And
so informal and so...
Exactly. And that bug of the Sai student had bitten.
Yes.
Okay. And so after the summer course got over, we were invited, Swami gave us an interview. He would give interviews to all the speakers. And that's when my mother told him, sorry, I think I'm missing out a big chunk, but yeah, let me revisit it later. That's when my mother told him, Swami, you have to take them into your school. And Swami's answer was, all schools are my schools.
Sai-ram.
All schools are my schools. This should be Swami's standard line.
Yes.
And she said, no, Swami, they have to come to Prashanti Nilayam and study in your primary school. And Swami said, okay, go to Prashanti, I will come and I'll give admission. And of course, that's a little longish story. I'm not sure whether you would like me to go into it or...
Let's share that story as well, because I'm sure there's some beautiful nuggets in there as well.
Yes, so immediately my father was called, right? And so the big chunk that I missed out was my thread ceremony was performed by Swami in 1989. And that was also a fantastic, beautiful experience, which probably I'll come back to later. And so my father was told that Swami has told us to go to Prashanti and wait there. And so my father brought my transfer certificate from the school that I was in Bahrain,
Right.
the Indian school. And so my father kind of got us, kind of
Got all the paperwork.
pulled us out from the
Yeah.
school, and we are now landing up. And the moment we went to Prashanti, we walked to primary school and we met Headmistress Auntie, and we said, Swami has asked us to join. And she says, very good. And he says, yeah, so we are ready. So she says, no, but I am not. I have not got any instructions. Right? You can't just walk in here and tell me that, So we're like, no. So we're like, no, we're not lying.
Yes.
Swami did tell us. He said, yes, I'm sure he did tell you, but he has not told me. They're like, okay, so now, this is how the equation kind of...
Yes. You had no idea how things worked.
Exactly. The loop needs to be closed.
Closed.
Swami needs to tell both the parties.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay. So then we just had to wait till Swami comes back from Vrindavan
Sai-ram.
to Prashanti Nilayam. And probably I think 4-5 days later he came. And then we took permission to sit in the first row to inquire about this. And so when Swami came, we just got up and my father told Swami, admission. And Swami says in the darshan line, Swami says, Swami, admission, no connection.
Oh, Sai-ram.
And Swami just walks off. Okay. And we're like, huh?
Where do we stand now?
Yeah. So like my father was like, okay, I've already brought their transfer certificates.
Yeah.
I can't go back to that school. And this is now looking a little dicey.
I see.
So, but my mother was so convinced and she was so forceful. She said, if not this school, any other Satya Sai school in the country, but he's good. They're going to join Satya Sai school. So there was a school in Kerala,
Yes.
the Sri Sailam school,
Yes.
the Sri Satya Sai Vidya Vihar, if I'm not mistaken, if that's the name. It continues to be there even now. So that was the one known school, which was a good school. And so my mother said, okay, fine, if not here, we'll put them there. So kind of that was settled, and we didn't even have a choice.
Right.
We just had to do what parents were telling us.
Yes.
And a few days later, we are just sitting in the darshan once again, and Swami has come for darshan, and we are like probably in the 10th or 15th row, and Swami just looks at both of us and says, go. Okay, and so generally the call for the interview meant go.
Go that way.
Right? That way.
Yeah.
And this was go. And so we were like, is that all? Means you're throwing us out of Prashanti Nilayam or what? Yeah. Okay, and so we were not sure whether it was us. And then Swami took a couple of steps and turned back and said, go. Okay, so we kind of got up and then we said, okay, Swami, you finished darshan? So my father kind of felt that I think this is the signal. The Swami is telling us to go to school. He never said go to primary school. Right? He just said go.
Go.
And so we waited for Swami to finish darshan because it doesn't look good getting up and walking out.
Middle, yes.
Okay, and then Swami had taken a few more steps and turns back and still seeing us sitting over there. Go! He says. So we got up.
Third time.
Yeah, third time. And then we went to the school. And there were instructions in the school to take us to the school. And then that's when we asked Auntie, but Swami told us that Swami admission, no connection. He said, see, you should not do that. And that's one of the things that we learned at that time. Never press on Swami in the darshan line because there are hundreds of parents sitting over there who also want the same thing.
Yes.
So now you're putting Swami on a spot. By, if Swami tells you, yeah, you go, then there will be 100 other parents who will say, Swami, my son also, my child also, how Swami manages that.
But look at his compassion too. That
Yes.
he's actually done what you require, but to look after so many hearts,
Exactly.
he has to take that stance.
And that's
Look
why
at
he's
that.
God. That's why he's
Sai
God.
Ram.
Because He's the god of small things.
Absolutely.
How that eye for detail, how to manage that
Oh,
situation.
yes.
Imagine, the Lord of the Universe has to manage these small things.
Small situations. Look after the entire universe, but also look after admissions into schools.
And ensure that the other parents don't feel as bad, and they don't feel like Swami was being partial to someone.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So Swami just said, admission, Swami, no connection. So probably several other parents would have heard that and said, oh, okay. Right?
That's how it works.
And yes.
And it's a marvelous example of attention to detail, which was hinted at in the episode you suggested, or you shared about the summer course dinner.
Correct.
Where he was precise about exactly where you were sitting, who you were connected to. So he's showing you along the way that he knows exactly everything about you.
Exactly.
Where you're sitting, what you need.
Yeah. And I think it's that even because everything about Swami is Sundaram. Everything about Swami is beautiful. Right? So even his ignorance of, oh, where are you? Even that is so sweet. You know? In fact, that is why I feel that the avatars come back again and again, not to establish dharma, highest that we can get, right? And it is this prema that he would do, and you would see Krishna in that, in that little mischievous looks and that searching for something. You knew that, hey, probably this is how, when you read Bhagavatam now, and you go through those moments where he stole butter and all,
the
probably,
the impishness.
This impishness is probably, hey, this is how he was, because I've seen those same expressions in Swami,
And isn't it beautiful? You mentioned that he's the God of small things. It's in these little expressions. It's in the feigned ignorance. It's in the little throwaway lines, the looks.
Yes.
It's in the small things that the prema is grown.
Yes.
Isn't it beautiful?
Yes.
So here you are in the primary school now.
Oh, yes.
In this most dramatic set of circumstances of will we or won't we? Will we go to Sri Shailam? Will we be here? How did the rest of your time as a now your life, your career as a Sai student has begun? What happens?
Oh God, it's absolutely incredible. This is like it can take on forever. In fact, the interview can go on forever. Yeah. So this was the first time we were like living away from home, and in fact, my sister was in her 10th class, which is a very important year in the Indian school system, which is the board exams.
Yes.
Pretty much defines your career ahead, because you get to choose the majors that you're going to do in 11th and 12th, and in fact, this is what Auntie had told us, Headmistress Auntie, that that's how we refer to her, Auntie, that this is the first time in the history of the school that anybody is being admitted into 10th class, because they never generally take a chance with the 10th class.
Yes.
Because it's a new atmosphere, and if the child does not settle down in the school, then it's kind of pretty much ruined.
Everybody loses.
Everybody loses, yes. And so, child, she told my sister, child, work hard. You need to settle down right away, because you don't have much time. You have the board exams in less than a year.
Pressure on this less.
Yes. And I mean, I don't think I'm not sure, I haven't spoken to my sister too much about this, but I don't think it was even a problem for us.
Not an issue.
Yeah, not an issue at all about settling. I think my sister took a little while longer, but I settled straight in. It's like, as if I always belonged to the place. So much so that my mother would miss us both, because for the first time we were away from her. And she would come and I would tell her, ma'am, I don't have time for you. So I settled right in, and I wouldn't miss my parents or my mother or anybody. Of course, we would go for darshans, and that's when you get to see the intimate side of Swami. I mean, you get further intimate to him, and so as primary school children, we went only on Thursdays and Sundays mornings, right? And so every morning he would come and he would start with what was breakfast, and then
ice-breaking question.
Yes, and idlis, if he says, and how big, this big, this big, this big,
details. I need details.
Yes, and so how many did you eat, and all of that, and that's how the conversation started. And then of course, plenty and plenty of chances to walk into his interview room. Those were some of that is the Swami. That is the Swami that I cherish in my heart. When I close and I meditate, it's that form of Swami that comes in front of me. Plenty and plenty of chances, plenty of stories there.
So personal, so intimate.
Yes. At the same time, it was not just about his relationship with you, but his relationship with your class. his relationship with the school.
Yes.
It mattered a lot. If Swami was not talking to the class or to the school, all of us felt equally bad,
Sorry.
right? So he would drop into the primary school very often. I remember in fact, and probably this is something that we can end this segment on, and that is, so brother, you're lucky because you got all of this.
Yes.
What about us? Is a question that I get asked by a lot of people, especially today.
Yes.
In fact, the Sai students who study today at the university, ask me this question every single time after every single session. Man, you were lucky. What about us? What did we do wrong to not get that? Right? And I have thought about it a lot. And this is the answer that emanates from the bottom of my heart. Is that every single generation that spent time with Swami, okay, always felt that the previous generation was luckier.
Yes. Yes.
Right? So, just to give you a very quick, we have a sir, his name is Ramakrishna Reddy sir. He came to Swami in 1964 as a boy of 11. Okay? Mother Ishwarama was there. At that time, the who's who. The mission of Sai was just kind of
Just
gaining,
taking off, really gearing up.
Yeah, gearing up,
Yeah.
gaining momentum.
Yes.
And that's when he was there. And he tells us that when he came there, it was in 1963 that Swami had stopped the Chitravati sessions.
Right.
That Swami would otherwise take the devotees to Chitravati, and
Yes.
incredible things would happen over
Yes.
there. Murtis coming out and food coming out.
Yes.
Dosas
Out of the sands.
out of the stands. And people told him, man, you're late. 1964. Because Swami has stopped taking us to Chitravati. Right?
So,
Right? The best times with the Lord are over.
Or over.
It's 1964. I was not even an idea. Right? Come 1969. And Swami sets up the university. Okay, and the newfound Sai students join the fray into the mission. And the early Sai students, hear from their seniors, which are the devotees, that now Swami has started the university, and so he has gone away a little. He started the college and he has gone away a little. And come 1979, and Swami sets up formally the university. Till then, from 69 to 79 was just the Arts and Commerce College. But the university was set up in 1979. And then Swami went on to become the Chancellor. And then there was the Vice Chancellor and the Registrar, and all of that came in. And the 1979 students had to hear from the 1970s batches that, Swami has gone further away. Because, you're not as lucky as we were.
No.
Because now Swami has become the Chancellor. Okay? Now he expects you to go to class.
Yes.
And stuff like that. And then we come in the 1990s to hear all of the stuff that we had missed from the previous generation. Right? And that's the beauty. Every generation feels that, we have missed a lot.
Yes.
But, we have got a lot.
Yes.
And that continues to happen even today.
Even today.
That this batch of students or this batch of the young adults and all of the children coming into Balvikas, even now they experience Swami's love. And, we missed a lot. But, we are getting a lot.
Getting a lot.
And this is going to continue. Okay, so this is my explanation to everybody that nobody has ever got everything.
Yes.
Right? At the same time, we are capable of getting everything from him.
Beautiful. And isn't that a wonderful promise that Swami gives us, that you just have to live, you will get me. You will get me. You will continue to get me, no matter when and where you're born.
Exactly. As Swami says, right? If you need me, you deserve me.
You deserve me. So,
You don't have to do anything.
so,
I don't, he doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. Right? So, were we qualified? No, we are not. Absolutely not. But did he qualify us? Yes, with his love. He qualified us with his love to share it. And now it's our bounden duty to live the life that he expected us to live, and to spread that love that he put into our hearts, for all of mankind and all of those people who are in our ambit to experience and enjoy that love.
Brother Amey, it's been a wonderful time that we've had with you. Thank you very much for being so generous. In conclusion,
Or don't even say generous.
Can you?
In front of his generosity, right? Can we even call ourselves generous? Yeah, so I think those are very, very generous words from your end. Yeah.
Can you leave us with what for you is the abiding driving force? What makes you go forth as a devotee of Swami, as a Sai student? What are the messages? What are the impressions? What are the driving forces for your life now?
Maybe I'll tell you one of the instances which has now come to become the cornerstone of my life. And that is, I never had a reason to write a letter to Swami, right? Everything was pretty much as smooth as it can be. Uh, but on my birthday was the one time that I felt that I can legitimately give a letter to Swami, because Swami would often tell us, that why are you guys, I given you so much of my time and you guys also give me letters. That's the height of, greed. How much more do you want from me? And so I used to feel, yeah, Swami, I'm not going to burden you with my letters, right? Because you have so much to handle from every month. But I used to feel, Swami, on my birthday, like it's a special day for me.
Yeah.
Come on, Swami.
I'll
Right?
take that liberty.
Yeah. So that day you have to accept my letter. I mean, I'm allowed this liberty. Right? So I did not have much to write, but I always had a certain prayer that I keep chanting every day, which I would write in the letter. And this all of these prayers were a conglomeration of several sources of beautiful documents. For example, The Loving God, written by Professor N. Kasturi. The very first chapter, the very first sentence starts with, "This time I was born on 25th of December, only to learn how not to be born again." Right? This time means in this birth, this body was born on 25th. And that kind of touched me so much, because Punarapi Jananam, Swami would say that, when are you going to get out of the cycle of birth and death? Right? So I would always say, Swami, today, in this birth, today is my birthday. Yes. Right? Teach me how not to be born again. Yet another year has passed by and I have not realized what is my source and whom I have to go back to. And so, my letter that would be the typical first line.
Yes.
And then I had this very beautiful prayer that one of the brothers had said in Swami's presence, which is, Swami, become the thinker of my thoughts, the doer of my deeds, and the speaker of my words. Right? I offer all these three to you. So I would put that down. I like that.
Yes.
Okay. And then in one of the letters to John Hislop, Swami himself had written that the only prayer that we must have is, I am you and you are me. Okay, we are one. Help me realize that. And so that would also be one of the lines. And Swami, guide me, guard me, and protect me. Okay, so this was the kind of the general content of the letter. And so I was sitting with the letter, and of course, what I would generally do is, I'll cut the story short. If Swami doesn't take the letter that day, then I just tear it off and throw, because I've lost out that that window of time.
Yes.
When I can be legitimate
Birthday,
with my Because otherwise, anyway, the prayer has reached him.
Yes.
Right. There's no need for a physical letter to go to him. Yes. Of course, I'll cut the story short. I was about to tear the letter. I got a beautiful message which made me hold on to the letter. And so I held on to the letter for the next 3 months, right? And it was March 18th, I think, 2007, when he just called me out of the blue and said, "What happened? Why are you holding the letter?"
Yeah.
And in fact, the letter was so soiled by then, because every day you would hold it.
Holding it.
So I had transferred the contents into a neat sheet of paper. And this was the version. Yeah, this was the version 1.2 or 2.0. So I was holding that, and then one day he just called me, and he took the letter and he opened the letter and he started reading through it. Right? So that was the first time so I'm sitting near Swami and he's reading the letter, and as he's reading, he's nodding. Okay, he's going through each of whatever I've written. He's nodding. And then he comes to this point where I've written, "I am you and you are me." And he looks at the letter, he looks at me, and with his finger he underlines that line. Okay, and then he hits me on my chest and says, "Adi Bhadram ga penchko," means develop that feeling more and more. Okay, that I am you and you are me. Keep that, let that feeling grow. Okay, and then he folds the letter and puts it back into my pocket and says, "Read that every day. Read that letter every day." So that letter still continues to be with me.
Sai
Of course,
Ram.
I've not brought it here,
Yes.
but it's still with me, and I think that's what's driving me. That I am you and you are me.
I can't think of a higher goal to have in life, and I'm very grateful that you're able to share these beautiful experiences and share a few laughs with us as well on your wondrous journey with Bhagwan Shri Sathya Sai Baba. Om Shri Sai Ram.
Very happy. Thank you so much, Sarah.